I want to thank you, Mr. President, for Kenya's leadership for multinational security support mission in Haiti. Our new global partnership is going to build on all this progress. We're going to make and meet new challenges with more resources. And it's going to strengthen the security of our countries and our countries around the world.
With the peace and security challenges that are undermining human well-being, slowing down development, and also having a negative impact on democracy. We affirmed our mutual commitment to the stabilization of Haiti through the multinational security support mission.
All right, so that was President William Ruto and President Joe Biden at the White House in Washington, D.C., speaking about many issues, but also that one stands out about the Haiti mission. Senator Onyoka, I know there's something you want to say, but can you push it until towards the end of the show?
Yeah, that's fine.
So that we can make progress on this issue of Haiti. And first, let me start with you, Dr. Kennan, because there has been contestations and a few cases filed in court saying that this decision is not constitutional. But now it's getting to that level. What would be your assessment of where we are? Never mind that the president says that it will be delayed a little bit because of logistical challenges. Where are we with that? The Haiti deployment?
I think we have talked about the issue of Haiti for quite some time. We have discussed it in Parliament, it went to the court, there's public participation, and I think for now we'll have just to leave it where it is, because ultimately it has gone to that level where right now the President of the United States and the President of Kenya have had it as one of topic for discussion. So I think the next is what to wait and see what the government will do administratively. Of course, there's so many things that will be taken into account. The state of affairs in Haiti, the logistics involved, the preparedness of our team, the legal issues that have been touted, and many other things. So for now, I think we'll have just to allow it to go through the stages that it's ought to go through. But I think where we have reached right now is a decision has been made, and therefore we just pray that our security officers will be sent there, will do a good job, that will improve our image, that will offer us better training opportunities, that will also contribute to the well-being of the international community. And that is the essence of having a diplomatic engagement.
Dr. Kanenje, if there was any doubt that the U.S. was critically interested in the Haiti mission, then I think that has been wiped out last week. But still, how do you convince Kenyans, especially those that are still challenging this move in court, but also how important is it for Kenya to succeed in this mission to Haiti?
First of all, Kenya's engagement in peacekeeping and sometimes peace enforcement operations is not something new. Peace diplomacy is actually a key plank of Kenya's foreign policy. So it should not be surprising that Kenya is interested in undertaking this kind of mission. The last two presidencies, President Uhuru and now President Ruto, has been fairly Pan-African, and not just Africans within the continent, but also African gene pool, outside the continent. And I think President Ruto has made it very clear with regard to his mission as well as his ambition, to do that. Now, it is important and justified, of course, for Kenyans. This is a democracy to ask, why are we going to Haiti, and why is this important, and how much is it going to cost, and everything else. We expect that kind of robust, discussions, as well as, citizens holding the government to account when it comes to the employment of men and women in uniform, because there are always risks involved. Now, how important is it that, that Kenya succeeds in this mission? Now, today Kenya's men and women in uniform, they're deployed in Somalia. We just came, out of a mission in DRC. It doesn't mean we may not go back, because we were the leaders, in this mission. Now, this, for us succeeding, it's going to be something important. But Kenya's success is not going to be done by Kenya alone. Critically important is going also to depend on the level of support we're going to get, not just from the United States, but other countries that have pledged to support the mission. Now, I think some of the reservations that some Kenyans, especially those who are familiar with the goings-on, is this is not exactly a UN-funded mission. And so it's going, while sanctioned mission is not funded. And so the fact that it's going to depend on volunteers to fund the mission, it's something that, of course, is worrying. But what that also tells us is perhaps based, of course, complete information is going to come out with regard to the president's, engagement with the United States, especially over Haiti, in the wake of congressional reluctance to approve some of the monies that were critical for our mission. And so I think from our Kenyan side, one thing we need to do is we have to ensure that not just the United States, but countries that pledged support, they do that because it's going to take more than just deployment of our police forces, which is a good thing from Kenya's foreign policy, and which is a good thing in trying to build Kenya's image. Remember, we are not only an anchor set in this region, Kenya is a country that's highly respected actually in the world. So how can we ensure that we maintain and sustain that kind of engagement, but we also ask other countries, including the United States, to start investing in other aspects? And some, if you can just allow me, to say something about this. I think on average, Kenyans do not even know where Haiti is, on the map. Is a small island, of Hispaniola, with about maybe, about 23,000 square kilometers, so roughly the size of Rwanda or Djibouti. So fairly small, but also very densely populated. But it's a country that has been the first black republic, independent for 200 years plus, okay? But a country that's also a stain to black people, because it's probably the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, And there's a lot of trouble in that country. And there's virtually no infrastructure. This is a country that's extremely desperate. And I've worked with a lot of Haitians myself, not just during my time when I stayed in Florida, but they've even come to visit me here. And so I have a fairly good understanding of it. And so for us to be able to succeed in that, first of all, is going to put Kenya in a very good place internationally, because many people have actually failed in that theater. And that is why, as we go in as a country, we should have no illusions. But we should be able to work 10 times harder than we've ever worked anywhere else in ensuring that the partners can come on board fully, because only that can ensure we're actually going to succeed. Because if there is going to be any issues, or if we're going to be too much politics, for instance, even here internally, in ways that we cannot support, because remember, once we deploy our men and women in uniform, it stops being a partisan issue. These are Kenyans, and they are there, and we're putting them in harm's way to help save our brothers or elsewhere. So yes, Kenyans can ask questions, but also Kenyans have a responsibility to protect, or rather to support our men and women in uniform once they're deployed there. We cannot deny them resources because someone hasn't given them resources. At the very least, let's complete the mission. If it's 1 year and it's not working and we have to come back, then we will. But we should not demonstrate lack of faith in the ability to be able to deliver when they're actually expecting us. The very least for us to have is actually to have faith in them. And so let's balance between our desire sometimes to demand political accountability, but at the same time to support our men and women in uniform who are deploying, most of them who are our sons and daughters.
And this is what the president said when he was asked about that deployment. He says that he's confident of success.
What it takes, we have the necessary experience, and we have built, as I talk to you, I have a team from Kenya in Haiti for the last 1 week doing an assessment of the capabilities that are available, the collaborations that are necessary. They have made contact, they have engaged with the Transitional Presidential Council, they have talked to the ministry responsible for security.
All right, he was talking about already the plans that are underway to make sure that succeeds. So the announcement by the UN, I think it was September last year, was that 1,000 police officers would be deployed to Haiti. Senator Onyonka, now that we are where we are, and it looks like this will actually happen, and shortly we'll be talking about what other security issues are coming up. What do you think, getting into that mission, never mind the challenges that are back here at home, what we must do?
First of all, I think you started this piece at the right point, where you heard President Ruto speak and you had President Biden speak. If you listened very, very carefully, and when you worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they train you what to pick. Biden's speech was, we will improve chances of our countries improving and working on its own security. He said that. Number two, then when President Ruto came, and you remember Biden never mentioned Haiti.
Yeah.
All right? It is President Ruto who then came up and said, for us, Kenya is ready, we want to go to Haiti, and as a result, Kenya is prepared and all that. Sami, there are two things I would like to mention to my president. Nobody would have any issue whatsoever if President William Ruto was to follow the law in making sure that when he takes our boys to Haiti, he does it within the law. Why am I saying so? Kenya provided regional support, military support to Namibia, which was in charge. The person who was in charge was Major General Pandey, I think. When they went to Namibia, it was one of the most successful tours that Kenya has ever had for peacekeeping. Kenya has provided these peacekeeping services, even during that time I was a deputy minister, in Somalia. All right. Initially, it was one of the most difficult challenges that our country was going to have, but the determination that the team had, and remember it was during that coalition government that President Kibaki and his team, the team which was managing the process for us to go to Somalia, made sure they did everything possible, including me, who went to the United Nations to go and present to the head of the African Directorate and explain to them that we have decided we are going to go in and let them allow us to go in. Mm-hmm. Because Somalia is our neighbor, we seem to understand each other, we can be good neighbors who are going to manage the transition and all that.
Right.
Then, of course, you remember, Kenyans forget very quickly, then piracy came in, then it was all over the place, and we moved on. If you look at the other thing that Kenya has ever done, we went to DRC. And when we went to the DRC, when did it happen? It was during President Ruto's time. Why was it that in the DRC there were challenges, there were issues who were coming? You remember the Kenyan Major General who was supposed to have been there was actually requested to leave by those people. Why? He was being accused of having taken sides. I'm not saying that is the case, but when such a mission happens that way, then you question yourself, why are we having those problems? Mm-hmm. Number two, you then look at another issue, which is immediately you finish with that one. Now Somalia is we are pulling out of Somalia because it's been long overdue. We should have moved out of Somalia. Somalia stabilized. I believe the government there should be able to handle those issues. When you look at the larger context of all these events that are taking place, this is nothing that we would disagree about. We would never question President Ruto's decision to take our troops to Haiti. Like my brother has said here, the president must follow the law. He cannot tell me that we are delaying the exercise, that in fact ABCD. That is not the case. Number two, we would like I sit in Parliament, at the National Assembly. I'm a senator. I don't even know what agreement he has signed. Shouldn't the Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations be in a position to interrogate under oath what the president has signed for, so that we know, is Kenya going to get into debt if we support Haiti because we're going to buy equipment and machinery? Who's funding? Is it the United Nations? The way it looks, I believe America is going to provide funding because, and then we as leadership, I think we are entitled to ask, why is it the United States of America, which is closer to Haiti, refused to send its troops to the ground or its police services to the ground? And then the last point I would most probably raise, Sami, is that even if you look at what we were doing in Congo, mm-hmm. Congo, you can argue they are French, yes, but they mostly speak Swahili. Most of the troops, especially you can understand. In Haiti, they speak French for the last 200 years. And Creole. I don't think that more than 5 of our police officers will be able to interpret French and discuss those things when orders are being given and stuff like that. We will be speaking Swahili, yes, and blah, 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 yes. And lastly, what is our determined agenda on entry point, and what is the feeling that we need to have an exit strategy, either whether we are successful or whether we find we are having challenges and we're going to fail. So that is what Sami...
Who will have that information?
I think
It is us, because we are the ones who have exposed our soldiers to danger. We must know from our principles, we must know from the UN, is this mission going to be 5 years? Is it going to be 2 years? Is it until when?
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Who is that particular person who should have that information?
The president, and he should have briefed the Senate, at least. You know, we are the only ones who can impeach him. So if anything goes and happens in Haiti and somebody brings a case and he loses that case at the International Court of Justice, that he actually took his troops, gave them a wrong order, and he has been taken there, and those people rule and say he's actually somebody who cannot hold office because he made the wrong decision. What then do you do? So isn't it better for him to brief us?
Just before I get to you, Dr. Kenan, Dr. Kanenje, so just before there was the current Transitional Presidential Council, the Prime Minister, who had just come to Nairobi to sign a few documents with the Kenyan government, it appears he lacked legitimacy. Of course, he didn't have a parliament, he didn't have a cabinet, and those have been questions that are being raised. And of course, nobody disagrees that it's an important mission to really go and restore peace and security in that area. But how do you go around that question that is pertinently being raised? Never mind, the president said that the legal instruments were put in place and signed, never made public. So where do you balance the participation within the country versus that important mission for the people of Haiti and the image of the country in the global space?
Yeah, two institutions generally are important in foreign policy making, and that is Parliament and the presidency. And the president is the #1 diplomat, and there are certain prerogatives that, of course, he also has. So there are circumstances where he's going to need Parliament. There are circumstances or issues where perhaps he may need to be able to proceed. Now, with regard to Haiti itself, yes, one of the issues that also many of us raised was the need to deal with an administration in Port-au-Prince that was actually legitimate. The Prime Minister who came here, they had outlived actually their mandate. And I think you've seen what happened immediately after that. I'm not even sure he was able to get back home. Now, one thing that is happening in Haiti, and efforts that we support, is transition. And that transition is going to be important. Being able to transition and hold elections that is going to be free and transparent, because the last time the election was held that's free and transparent, no one actually remembers in Haiti. And that has created a crisis of legitimacy. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, any administration and any deal that any administration engages in, it is seen as representing the interests other than Haitians. And so even some of the demonstrations you saw in Haiti, especially against the deployment of Kenyan troops, referring to Kenyans as puppet of the United States, part of it is informed by that perception that the administration in Port-au-Prince is not legitimate to actually represent the people. And so as Kenya, we know we are not going there as puppets of another country, and if that is the case, then we should also keep encouraging efforts to ensure there is a transition in Port-au-Prince, so that our deployment is not seen as aiding and abetting administration that have actually been predatory to Haitians for much of the last 20, 30 years or so. So it is a legitimate question to raise, but it's also something that is beyond the control of Kenya, as a country. It is something the international community needs to bring pressure to bear, but also help build institutions, because you cannot keep peace where there is no peace. Mm-hmm. So for us to be able to assist successfully, there's going to be need for institutional rebuilding, a degree of political stability, even though, of course, law and order also comes to ensure that there's political stability, but constitutional reform that can guarantee certain aspects, but also ensure representation of many Haitians who've been disenfranchised from the political system of Haiti, for the last 3 decades.
Dr. Kenan, what's your take on this?
I think corrections, first of all.
Yep.
This mission is called a multinational
Security Support Mission.
Security Support Mission. It's a UN resolution, it's a United Nations UN Security Program.
Yes, yes.
So it's not that
it's sanctioned.
UN Security Sanction. So
yeah.
meaning, that being the case, I think the funding and the other component will be within the framework of the UN. But also remember, America being one of the only remaining superpower right now, and being a neighbor, and the proximity they have to the refugee crisis, the migrant crisis, the security crisis, they have every justification, just like we have done in Somalia, just like we have done in DRC, to be the lead country in certain administrative issues. So that I don't see a problem. The other bit is, I think there's certain, one allegation my good friend, Senator, has made. This thing has gone through Parliament, has gone through public participation. The Committee on Administration and Security in the National Assembly. And I think roles of the two houses are clearly defined in the Constitution. What is for the Senate and what is for the National Assembly. A report was prepared, and there was only one decision, the Honorable Kaluma. The Honorable Kaluma actually dissented. The report was passed in the Parliament. After that, I think somebody went to court. It went through the process. So I think where we are right now, it's not fair to say that it has not gone through Parliament. It has gone through the National Assembly, which is the correct position, because this is a security issue. But I think what belongs to what is within the ambit and the mandate of the Senate, I wouldn't want to delve into it, because you understand better than I do. So that being the case, I think the stage where we have reached right now, remember, Kenya has been an oasis of peace and tranquility, not only in East Africa and Horn of Africa, but also in the entire world. And that is something that we're very proud of. And being a member of also, I'll use the word, a responsible member of the international community. I think there are certain things that we must do on behalf of the international community. This issue of Haiti has been politicized. Where it has reached right now, I think it has reached the highest level. There was need for public participation, it happened. There was need for Parliament to be involved, it happened. There was need for the courts to be involved, it happened. There was need for generally public debate. Finally, where it has reached is now an issue between the key players, Kenya and the US. Kenya as a member of the United Nations. So ultimately, what Kenya will do, if there was no problem, I think we will not require the Kenyan police officers actually to go there. There's a problem, there's a crisis, a security crisis, a political crisis that the international community must solve. Let me finish this.
You're right.
In Haiti. So if there was no problem, there will be no need to send our officers. The fact that there's a problem, a transitional problem, the fact that there's a security crisis, the fact that there's a historical crisis in Haiti, implodes upon the entire membership of the UN community to contribute directly or indirectly in the stabilization of Haiti. And I think that's what we have done.
Okay. Dr. Kennan, you're right on that this process has gone through Parliament. But remember, the High Court decided that the National Security Council did not require to take the motion to Parliament. So even if it did, that process was unnecessary, according to the High Court. And that is what
I think all the issues raised by the court have already been addressed.
That's what I'm saying, yes, that eventually the president signed what he called reciprocal agreements.
Yes.
But there has been those questions on who wrote the reciprocal law in Haiti, which parliament passed it, which cabinet approved it.
But, and then the other bit, and I'm sure, of course, within the current constitution, any international agreement actually, again, must be domiciled within the law, must also be brought to the House. So that will come. This is the first. If there's any agreement that has been signed between President Ruto and President Biden on this and another issue, those issues will come to the right before the right committees. They will subject them, bring them to Parliament, just like what they have done will also go through Congress. I think we are at the infancy stage of what may have come out of that very important state visit, including the Haiti issue.
Right.
So let's
could I just
yes, quickly, so that we
for a minute. I want to give my brother Kenan a lot of respect for having been very polite, for trying to say that he thinks the Senate is a useless place.
No, I didn't.
I tell you this. No, I told you sometimes you don't quote what your friend has not said. The point I'm making that chances are, after the next elections, if he comes to the House, he's not going to say, Onyonka, I wish I had listened to you. Honorable Kenan, the Senate has a role to play. Why? I've told you here today. We are the only ones who can impeach a president.
No.
So if you do if you do it unconstitutionally, that can never be written off or thrown aside. Please internalize what I've said. Number two, I have listened some to my brother here talk about the expectation. What I am saying, and I would like to repeat it again, is this. We don't have a disagreement for President Ruto to take our troops. No. What we have with him, do it properly, do it within the law, satisfy the requirements of the Constitution. Then we accept collective responsibility as Kenyans, and we support you as our president. Stop pushing Kenyans every time. No, we want to do this, the law. No. The Constitution we have doesn't want anybody to show us a finger. That's point number one. Point number two, Haiti's success, I hope President William Ruto has already looked for Kenyans who are experts, who have handled conflict resolution, who are people that will go there and sit and start discussing what my brother said in terms of creating institutions. There is no state called Haiti. Haiti is a name. What is going to happen, it means that if the Kenyan delegation arrives in Haiti and manages to create those institutions, and if President Ruto succeeds in this, then he would be a star. He would be the African man with the solutions that Africa needs. Because Haiti's problem is the African problem. Historically, people have fought over resources, marginalization, the hustler nation and the dynasties. That is what has been in Haiti. And then the Americans came in. Why? Because for them, Haiti was basically a banana republic that didn't need any help and any security. America didn't know that Haitians would now be moving to America as refugees. And that is where we are. So depending on how we hold ourselves, depending on how we manage this process, the transition, the settlement, and the arrangements that the Haitians themselves will require that those things are done, then I would hope that as an exit strategy, President William Ruto will then begin to engage the Americans and the United Nations to begin an economic program so that Haitians can start receiving the basics. Haitians have no drinking water, they have no medical services, they have got nothing. The only thing that comes in if you have dollars, which then is remitted from the diaspora because of the millions of Haitians who live in America.
Right.
People are able to buy whatever they can get for sustainability. Haiti has nothing. So the challenge is bigger and the responsibility is bigger. And I hope that when our troops go there, and when President Ruto assigns somebody, I hope he'll be able to talk to somebody on a daily basis. Because if many of our boys die, he'll be held liable because he's the president.
I hear you. And something else happened, which I want us to break down, that Kenya is now designated as a non-NATO ally. Listen to President Biden.
Working with Congress to designate Kenya a major non-NATO ally. That's a fulfillment of years of collaboration. Our joint counterterrorism operations have degraded ISIS and El Shabaab across East Africa. Our mutual support for Ukraine and has rallied the world to stand behind the UN Charter.
So, Dr. Kanenje, what exactly does that mean, that Kenya is designated as a major non-NATO ally?
Yeah, first of all, I'm hoping most Kenyans who are watching know what the North Atlantic Treaty Organization stands for. It is the longest, most enduring collective security organization in the world, founded immediately after the Second World War, as in a bid to contain the emerging, communist, states led by Moscow. Now, there are about perhaps just less than 24 countries that are designated as, major non-NATO ally. I think the most prominent of those is actually Taiwan, among others. Now, that does not make Kenya a member of NATO. I think it's important for Kenya to understand that. So we've not joined the alliance. It's unlikely that a country on the continent will ever join the alliance in the foreseeable future, considering the geopolitics of the world. But it is more about perhaps getting some preferential treatment when it comes to certain weapon systems, maintenance, as well as training, loans and stuff like that relating to security. That does not mean that Kenya cannot engage other countries. And because I think some Kenyans are probably thinking now, does that mean we won't be able to procure equipment or military training or, from other countries? No. It simply gives Kenya some kind of preferential treatment, especially by the U.S. Armed Forces, because most non-NATO allies, it has a lot to do with the relationship with the U.S. military as opposed to relationship with, let's say, some of the transatlantic partners, out there, even though to some extent it may extend there. There are certain sensitive technologies that, of course, only NATO countries are going to be given, and some NATO countries may have access to some of that technologies, without full-scale kind of deployment of those technologies in those countries, because, again, they're not part of the collective arrangement. And yes, now, for us in Kenya, what one may hope is that perhaps that may mean that Washington is going to be a little bit more engaged in supporting Kenya's, especially peacekeeping and peace enforcement missions in the region. Today, as we speak, ATMIS mission is supposed to be winding down, but are our neighbors, and is our neighborhood safe enough to actually for Kenya to withdraw from it? Mm-hmm. The answer is no. Their neighborhood is not safe enough. So, in a way, this may also mean that this designation may allow Kenya to access certain help that's going to be critical in advancing the mutual interests of peace and stability in the region. Of course, that also depends a lot of times on the dynamics of U.S. Congress and depends on which Congress is controlling the day. Of course, when a country is designated as such, then Congress is going to be less likely to oppose certain engagements as opposed to when it's not. And so we're hoping that beyond even the Biden administration, that this kind of engagement is going to ensure that. What now as a country, which is also a non-aligned country, that we also have to be careful is we don't want to put ourselves in a place where, for instance, because the perception within the continent is also very important for us. And to be able, as the first sub-Saharan African country, is not something I would say we have to celebrate because Kenya is, one of the top 5, 6, largest economies on the continent anyway. But how can we also communicate this to our African partners to ensure that they recognize that, well, perhaps this kind of engagement is going to be beneficial, not just for Kenya, but also for the region. Because what you don't want is, especially in the wake of the emerging geopolitics, is for other countries to start fighting you politically, because that is going to reduce the type of diplomatic, leverage that Kenya has always enjoyed, not just in the region, but across the continent. And fundamentally important is this is a time that Kenya is also trying to bid for the seat at the AU Commission, chairmanship. So it's going to be important for instance, for our PR to be able to communicate that, but also for a team from Nairobi to make sure we actually profit from this kind of engagement. It is one thing to be given a certain right or privilege. It's another thing to actually exploit those kind of privileges and those kind of access. And one thing we've done very well sometimes as a country, and not just, it didn't start recently, is we never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And hopefully that is going to change going forward.
And are there conditions here for this designation? Can Congress take it away at some point? Yeah.
Yep. But proceed. Yeah.
Go ahead. If there are any conditionalities for this recognition.
Let's give a historical context to what the term major non-NATO ally actually means and how this was conceived by the Americans. You see, immediately after the Second World War and at the height of the competition between communism and capitalism, countries positioned themselves to either identify themselves with the West or the East. But slowly, when the Americans sensed that communism was going to disintegrate in the early 80s, in the late 80s, they came up with this term. This was meant to circumvent the membership positively, actually, of NATO, because to become a member of NATO actually is stringent, I think, as you have seen it. So the Americans being the global, they have given themselves that title, the global watchdog, they had to look around, and there are countries that have been given this status. Japan, South Korea, You look at the history of now, understand where South Korea is. Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Colombia, Brazil. In the Middle East, countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, no, not Djibouti, Qatar. And then in Africa, we have had Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco, and now Kenya as the only south of Sahara, the only. What does it come with, and how has Kenya earned this? I want to take you back. For the last 15 years, first of all, President Ruto is the only African president who has been accorded a state visit. The last one was the Ghanaian president actually in 2007 and 2008. State visit comes with so many things, but I don't want to go into the definition. But why has Kenya earned this title? In the midst of this region has been bedeviled with social, political, economic, cultural, religious actual upheavals and turmoil. Kenya has been an oasis of peace, tranquility, and therefore the conferment of this status is not a mean achievement. What does it come with? Certain serious considerations on security training, on technology transfers, on financial support, on infrastructural support. And therefore, if you compare now that status with how South Korea has benefited, Japan has benefited, Indonesia has benefited, Egypt has benefited, those other countries. So this is something that we ought to be very, very proud of as a country. And ultimately, politics aside, you'll see the benefits in the first few years, and the few years actually. How will it benefit Kenya? Technological transfer, that's what we require. How will it benefit Kenya? Support within the financial system, international financial system. Who controls the Bretton Woods institutions? It's the Americans. Who controls the international security system? It is the Americans. Who now sets the global agenda? It's the Americans. Who has the veto power in the UN Security Council? It is the Americans. So this is something that every country actually in the world has been aspiring actually to achieve. And therefore, mine is to say that kudos President Ruto and the team that has worked this. The team in the presidency, the team in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs led by the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi and P.S. Songoi, and our mission in our missions, actually, let me say, in Washington and New York and in Los Angeles. This is not a mean achievement. The other bit that right now we need to look at, now that this has come with so many other bilateral issues.
Okay.
These bilateral issues will be domesticated. Some of them, first of all, this status, I think, will be subjected to, it's called MNNA. It will be subjected to congressional approvals. I think when that is done, it's something that is going to live even after any regime change in America. But I think this was, again, that was done as a result of, it was given a bipartisan approach. It wasn't purely a democratic initiated product. The Republicans were involved because both river and enjoy the role Kenya plays.
Okay.
The other bit that we need to look at, and we need to understand, look at our region, look at the East African region, look at the Horn, look at the Sahel region. The Sahel region has completely gone out of the ambit of the Francophone sphere of influence. Where has it gone? It has gone to either Russia or China or allied groups, meaning French as a member, as a very important member of NATO, has been edged out from the Sahel region. Meaning the American or the Western influence, the NATO influence in Western, that part is diminishing. There are challenges in the South. There are challenges in the Horn. I do not want to mention the name of our neighbors here. Taking that into account, look at the Kenyan's position. And I believe that's why America, in their own wisdom, of course, countries relate to, the Americans have to look at their interest.
Right.
If there's a convergence point of our interest and the American interest in the global security, that is what has earned others. So this is the high, it's actually one step short of a full-fledged member of NATO. So the benefits that will accrue from this, I can bet, if we do it properly, will take us and help us join the league of developed nations like South Korea, like Indonesia. And I want to take you back, my friend.
Sorry, before you take me back, I need to hear from Senator Nyoka, because sorry, I'll get back to you. There's a question I've asked about if there are conditionalities, but also, what did you want to say?
Sami, I am shocked at what Adan Keinani is talking about. Nobody gives you anything for free.
I said that.
Nobody. When you say that we have to be very, very, very happy that this has happened. My brother, I'll tell you, we must be very, very, very worried that we are taking this position. Historically, Kenya has been known as a country where we were unaligned, where we took a position which was assumed to be morally, politically, and economically correct. What has happened is that President William Ruto has just found himself in this thing. In fact, I can tell you what fast-tracked President Ruto being given a state address is the day they saw when President Raini from Iran coming to Nairobi. You know, that state visit was shocking, because the Americans then began asking, what are the Iranians doing in Nairobi? And the Israelis started asking the same question. Immediately, for somebody at the State Department must have called a meeting and said, what is it that we are going to do in Kenya before we stop? In other words, President William Ruto has always had diplomatic policies which are either blowing hot and cold, depending on which side was on the table. Now, what the Americans are telling him is this: now your side is going to be this one which is hot. You are going to be pro-West. You are going to make sure that you do whatever the Americans and NATO ask you to do. The major non-NATO special ally designation is basically meant that, yes, the Americans now are comfortable, and NATO itself, to bring the equipment and military hardware into this country. You see what is happening in Nanyuki? That is what the Americans are going to do, whether they set it up in Manda or wherever they do. The point I would like to raise to my president is very simple. When you look at the nitty-gritty of the agreements they are going to sign, I hope that his position is that he is going to negotiate for arms and any other of those things that Honorable Kainan has raised, but for defensive purposes and not offensive. There's a difference, Sammy, when you get military equipment, which is being brought to your country for the purpose of who? You are ready to invade anybody or somebody if something happened. And those are the things, for me, I would like us to legislate as members of the National Assembly and members of the Senate. We must know, what are we providing to the United States of America government by them giving us that state? Honorable Kainan, you will mention, and I appreciate what you've said about the benefits which are going to come. Look at the way Japan is doing, South Korea. My position, my brother, is very simple. South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, and all those countries are done well because they've been given an opportunity. Most of their goods are exported to the United States. That's why they were given a special economic status. If the Americans give us that, then I'm ready to say, my brother, yes, fantastic score. But if we are just going to bring American soldiers here who keep talking to us about, man, you know what I'm saying, man, those things we don't want. That's going to be a story. You'll see the things coming in the next 5 years. We want a serious engagement where the benefits are tangible. Kenya needs economic growth and development. If that is what these special status, non-major nation status that Kenya is going to be given, if they can give us the economic benefits that come, like AGOA, to be increased, you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Where our students need to be given scholarships to go and learn in the US, where the American government can actually support many of their companies to come and set up here in Kenya so that we can start producing some of the products which the Americans are going to use when we are a member of this special status nation. Then, Sami, why would I say?
So, Dr. Kainan, if the U.S. Congress is coming on board to approve or reject the designation, what should the Kenyan Parliament do? Do you have a right to accept or reject?
The current constitution actually allows for the domiciling of all international agreements, actually. So a Parliament has to be informed, Parliament has to make a decision. So that is provided for under the current constitution. But I think this status that has been conferred in Kenya is a bipartisan process in America, and therefore I think there will be no room for rejection.
That's what I'm saying.
But the other bit...
sorry, what I'm asking is, so you're saying it's bipartisan, which is fine.
Yes.
But you see, the president has stated Congress will agree or reject. If they agree, well and good. The US systems will have done their work. How about Kenya?
Absolutely, it will come through...
the president's word final?
No, it will come through the relevant. Once there's an international agreement, I think the law says that it must come through the relevant Commonwealth Parliament will be notified. That's the same procedure. So I don't want to speculate on the same. But if it is on finance, it will come through the finance committee. If it is on defense, it will go through the defense committee. So that will be done. But I think there's something that my brother here has jammed. Mm-hmm. You see, foreign relations, by definition, is the strategies countries use to relate to other countries and the other non-state actors. And therefore, I don't think whether the system led by President Ruto just blindly went into a relationship. Okay. First, their basic definitional or concept issue of what it means to be MNNA, which is global. Second, the unique issues that relate to Kenya. It is not true. I think you also need to add, statecraft is something very complex. Mm-hmm. Over the years, 99% of our diplomatic engagement actually has been Western-oriented, Western-placed, and Western-centered. That doesn't stop Kenya doing business with other countries. I think this is the thing that actually we need to understand. If you look at in terms of our security orientation, if you look at in terms of our economic orientation, finance orientation, literally, it has been Western-oriented. But that did not take away the right of Kenya to be a member of the non-aligned, or even to take a position that doesn't resonate well generally with what the West thinks. That's why, for me, I'm not worried. This has been consistent. Our foreign policy actually has been consistent. The other bit, my friend, this country has been voted as the best in human resource capital, and I agree with him that there has to be educational opportunities. Being the best in human resource capital by the UN means Kenyans have the potential, the ability to work everywhere. And that's why in that agreement, I'm yet to see the final nitty-gritty.
The best in human capital index, where?
By the UN.
Where?
The Kenyans, in terms of our education system.
Globally or?
Globally, yes, the best in, yes. 3 consecutive years, from 2008, I think 2008, you need to check the years. We have been voted as...
In Africa or in the world?
In Africa. The best in human resource capital actually in Africa. That's correct. So that being the case, we have the potential. We have natural resources that have not been properly tapped. Mm-hmm. Our geopolitics, I dare say this, has given us that status. You just need to look at the neighborhood. Okay. Both where in East Africa, the Horn of Africa, even south of Sahara.
All right.
And part of the Northern African states, like for example, if you look at Morocco, Morocco has special status with the EU. Morocco has also special status with the US. But Morocco shares a border. The Gibraltar Strait is less than a kilometer actually to Spain. If you look at again the proximity of Tunisia to the west, if you look at again the special geopolitical position of Egypt to Israel, to the Middle East, to America, that status, those 3 countries were in that region. Kenya is the only south of Sahara. Honestly speaking, I will say without fear, without any contradiction, that the only thing right now we need to do is we need to optimize okay. With the agreement so that we benefit. If there is a technological transfer, I'm told the current American ambassador, who has been the CEO of this group that they call HP. The HP, it's called the Fortune 500 group. We are lucky to have such an ambassador who has a business mind to be the US representative here. Ordinarily, we have ambassadors who are politically oriented. So we can take advantage. We have a business lady, turned ambassador, turned whatever, who is now spearheading this particular process. So she'll be seeing things purely from an economic... Allow me to conclude this.
I want us to make...
Just this final point.
Yes.
One of the key pillars of our foreign engagement is economic diplomacy. Right. So this thing right now being done, the status of that MNNA and the other components resonate with our #1 foreign policy, which is economic and commercial diplomacy.
All right, I hear you. Don't you find that interesting that we are counting on the U.S. ambassador to Kenya, yet we have our own to different countries?
It's collaborative. It's collaborative. They do it. It's collaborative. By the way, let me use...
Sami, is it next or me?
No. He is next, but I want us first to listen to what the president said about the relations between Kenya and the U.S.
There's nothing for free.
Absolutely, there's nothing for free.
Sorry, just listen to...
Blunt terms. If a choice is made between investment by China and investment by the United States and companies, which would you prefer?
You know, let me tell you, Quest, many people want to pull us into a conversation as to whether we are facing east or we are facing west. Let me tell you, we are neither facing west nor facing east. We are facing forward.
That's a brilliant answer.
We are facing forward. And as we face forward, Dr. Kanenje, if you look at...
Sammy, the president is saying the country is on autopilot.
What do you mean?
If you are not forcing right or forcing left when you are in the center, what does it mean?
No, he says we are guided by our interest, our national interest.
Absolutely. There's no interest which is ever neutral.
No.
There's no interest.
Okay.
If you accept, even when you drive a car, that's why it has a neutral gear. The car doesn't move.
Bro, he said we are guided.
That is a clever and cheeky answer.
He said,
basically is inconsequential.
He said,
what is it moving forward? That is the reason why you have him inviting Raisi to come to Nairobi, and he knows Kenyan positions with Iran. That is why you'll find him discussing things about Israel, which even Kenyans don't understand. And that is why people are like, why is the president not taking you said it yourself, the Western correct position?
What he's saying, and that answer, I know you will define it. What he's saying...
And Sammy, nobody listens. I'm sure he doesn't listen to the experts in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
No,
that's why you have the mess you have.
What he said, you are also, I was also your chair, I was also your member, you remember. But what he's saying is our foreign policy is guided by...
Going forward. Explain what that is. Explain what going forward is.
Can I say what the import of that statement is? Our interaction with any other sovereign state, whether a state or a non-state actor, is guided by our territorial integrity and sovereign national interest. That's why he's saying you can have infrastructural engagement with China.
Sovereign, what is that? What is that? Is it going forward or going left or going right?
Okay, that's the difference. That's why if we have an economic interest...
Thank you for giving me a good answer.
If we have a, bro, you are...
Bro, you are a senior guy.
Let me finish.
Don't apologize for the government. I know you are in the government.
Let me finish this.
Please, just, you know you are respected.
Let me finish this.
I feel pain when a leader like you comes here.
Just
please hear him.
Thank you.
The definition is this. First, our engagement with any sovereign state, any other entity, whether a state or non-state actors, is determined by two things. Our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, and our sovereign national interest. These are the two key denominators. Two, we have economic pillar, which is our number one pillar of our foreign policy. But we also have other pillars. We have infrastructural pillar, we have peace pillar, we have cultural pillar, and therefore we can relate very well with America, but equally have serious engagement with China, with Russia, with any other country that does not infringe our national interest. And that's what actually the president was trying to say. Our interest is going forward.
Okay.
We're looking forward. And I think that should not be seen in another context.
Can I move forward and speak to Dr. Kanenje? Because I was talking about the White House page that talks about the fact sheet on the concessions between Kenya and the U.S. It has a lot of promises, a lot of pledges, a lot of resources indicated as the administration commits. It is not even the U.S. government. It is the administration commits to, then they state the resources. What does that exactly mean, knowing too well that in 6 months' time, in actually about 5 months' time, there will be an election in the U.S.? Will they stick or they die with the administration? Should there be change, that is?
Yeah. So should I respond facing east or west?
Face forward.
Moving forward.
Face forward.
Face forward.
You move forward.
Yes. Yeah, no, first of all, that was a very smart answer by the president.
Absolutely.
It's a very diplomatic answer, and it is true that we should always
agree that was a smart answer.
We should always this is coming in the wake of what is going on in the world, and especially the tension between the East and the West. And there is always a tendency by Western pundits to try and pigeonhole, African leaders. And you remember way back when Nelson Mandela was asked, somewhere in New York, why, he is talking to Fidel Castro and Gaddafi, and he said the problem with you guys is you always want that your enemies to be our enemies, and that is not true. So, for instance, if the East, if Beijing is an enemy to Washington, which is not actually because they do business, then that should not, come down to us. Now, there were a lot of promises and a lot of commitments by the administration. Now, there are commitments which are going to be tied to the current administration because of the policy of Democrats generally, and the commitments especially to do with certain aspects of aid and stuff like that. But then the commitments which commit the American government, irrespective of who comes in power, there's a likelihood that Joe Biden may be going home, in November. But irrespective of that, there's certain commitments are going to go beyond that. And so when we look at the nitty-gritty, with regard to commitment, for instance, certain commitments of support things like democracy, short-term programs and stuff like that, some of them may be tied to the State Department, but fundamental aspects of U.S. engagement with the United States are unlikely to change, irrespective of who is the president. Now, as we've mentioned before, one thing that is going to be critical, for us, it's like we've just signed an MOU. So how can we ensure we actualize this MOU in a way that is actually beneficial to us? And that's going to take a team of very determined, patriotic, and competent, bureaucrats to be able to follow up, but also to build another team on the other side to constant lobbying of whichever Congress comes in power. Because let's be honest, today you're having a slight majority of Republicans. Perhaps in November you may have a slight majority of Democrats. Yes, consistently, and build bilateral partnerships institutionally. For instance, between our Parliament and the Congress, between our government, bureaucrats and theirs, that is going to ensure that this story, continues in ways that's actually going to extract these resources. We've made lots of deals with so many countries over the years. And if you pay attention to, for instance, the kind of Kenya's bilateral engagement with other countries, you're going to see we actually have a number of MOUs, with a number of countries. But how can we actualize this? Remember, one of the very important things that personally I was happy about was the U.S. commitment, using the Everstrong Capital, company to complete the Mombasa-Nairobi Expressway, and that is huge. If actually construction starts next year, it's also going to be a game changer. Now, we also know that there was another U.S. company that fell off, because this story has been going on for a decade, right now. Now, how can we ensure that actually, for instance, within the next 5 months, we make sure that everything is in place and it's been signed in ways that we can be able to start construction. So it does not then matter who else is going to come to office. So I think Kenyans need to understand that these commitments are not just tied to this administration. There are those that are going to be tied to this administration because Democrats have different policies of engagement as opposed to Republicans, but there are others which are going to be fundamental policy of the United States government. And the United States looks at Kenya as a very important country. Now, just to mention about Meg Whitman, Kenya arguably has probably one of the most influential American diplomats anywhere in the world right now. And she can speak with authority in ways that almost no other even American politician can. Because number one, not only is she a former CEO of Hewlett-Packard as well as eBay, and also worth more than $5 billion, but she ran for governor of California. So she's actually known. And by the way, she's a Republican, who was appointed by a Democrat. So she has a stature that is so big. And in diplomacy, and especially in terms of decision-making, that kind of stature matters. And so perhaps whether or not someone likes her, Kenya can also make use of that current stature of her to extract as much as possible before she actually leaves home. Okay,
it's 2 minutes after 8. I have to end it at this point, but first to take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV Kenya. At Sam Gituku, the hashtag to use is Citizen Daybreak. So Nixon Dugire, you're saying that I wish whatever deal there is between Kenya and the US can lead to great gains of Kenya shilling against the US dollar to a tune of, say, 70 shillings. Otherwise, the ties should directly benefit the somehow neglected Mama Mboga and Boda Boda guys. Okay. Bob Otieno is saying the meeting between President Ruto and the President of the US was a successful one, which has propelled Kenya to the top, or on the top of the world, more so being admitted as a friend of NATO because of Haiti mission, and it will gain a lot from the deals too.
That is Bob Obiuno?
No, Bob Otieno.
Okay.
Bob Obiuno. Well, you confuse me. Babu Michael is saying that I feel the deployment of our police officers to Haiti is more of a US issue than is a Kenyan issue, with the legal issues around it as mentioned by the courts and our legislators. I hope we could put everything in order first. No one is opposing it. Dima King, you're saying that if Kenyans were to listen to at least one voice of reason on matters Haiti, all the right questions asked have no straight answers, from the legitimacy of interstate agreements to the deployment of our boys. It is not clear on how they will cope. And then Okello Molimo is saying that, dear Mr. President, kindly solve our local issues first before embarking on international duties. Kindly resettle those who were displaced by floods and provide long-lasting security solutions in Baringo and dismantle all terrorism networks. Charity begins at home, His Excellency. Well, that's the feedback that has come to us. Many issues raised there, including that the dollar should be...
You still didn't allow me
selling at 70 shillings. Yes, because we are out of time. I have to thank you, Senator Richard Onyonka from Kisii County, Dr. Hassan Kanenje from Horn International Institute of Strategic Studies, as well as Dr. Eden Kenan, Member of Parliament for Elders, but also former chairperson of Defense and Foreign Relations. And before I forget, Senator Onyonka was once Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs Ministry under President Kibaki.
And a member of my committee.
And a member of Kedan's committee. Okay, asante sana. My name is Sam Kituko. See you again some other time. Bye for now.